I was on a photography trip. I was teaching photography in Italy. And, in the creative life, sometimes you make choices and you look back and you think, well, that was not my best idea ever. And I was angling for a photograph. I hopped down to a spot on a quite a tall wall and missed my footing and fell 30 feet. This was in Pisa, Italy, fell 30 feet onto concrete, shattered both of my feet, and spent a long time in recovery. Number of surgeries, and 12 years later, things were not getting better. They were getting much worse, and arthritis was setting in. And I was hitting 50 and thinking I still have some life in me. And my surgeon said, "Well, this is kind of as good as it gets." And anyone that knows me kind of knows those are fighting words. And so I said, "Well, that's not good enough for me." And I asked if anyone ever just, and the problem was on my right foot. My right foot just wasn't healing. It had been fused. I'd had some surgeries. Nothing was working. And I just said, does anyone just choose to cut this thing off and, send it to recycle?
David DuChemin is a humanitarian and wildlife photographer. He travels the world teaching photography, but perhaps he's best known for his deep insights into the creative process. For David, his personal creative process hit a serious bump in the road when he decided to amputate his leg after over a decade of pain and dysfunction. What is this new identity that's part amputee, yet part world explorer? How do you reconcile the two? Or do you? Join us for an interesting and far ranging conversation. David, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you
Hi,
would,
Pat.
hi, tell us your story.
Well, how much time have you got? So I'm a photographer. For a long time, was known as a humanitarian photographer, and I've since turned my camera more towards wild subjects, wildlife and conservation, that sort of thing. I like big things. I like bears and rhinos and lions and leopards and that sort of thing. And I think where we probably connected in terms of my story, I I was on a photography trip. I was teaching photography in Italy. And, in the creative life, sometimes you make choices and you look back and you think, well, that was not my best idea ever. And I was angling for a photograph. I hopped down to a spot on a quite a tall wall and missed my footing and fell 30 feet. This was in Pisa, Italy, fell 30 feet onto concrete, shattered both of my feet, and spent a long time in recovery. Number of surgeries, and 12 years later, things were not getting better. They were getting much worse, and arthritis was setting in. And I was hitting 50 and thinking I still have some life in me. And my surgeon said, "Well, this is kind of as good as it gets." And anyone that knows me kind of knows those are fighting words. And so I said, "Well, that's not good enough for me." And I asked if anyone ever just, and the problem was on my right foot. My right foot just wasn't healing. It had been fused. I'd had some surgeries. Nothing was working. And I just said, does anyone just choose to cut this thing off and, send it to recycle and, and she said, yeah, some people do choose amputation. I don't think she felt like it was the right conversation for the right time. So she let me stew on it for a little bit. And I have a very good friend who's an amputee, and I have watched him do things physically that I haven't been able to do for many years because of this injury. And so finally, I said, if this guy as an amputee can run half marathons and do things that I can't, I said I'm willing to give it a try. So on June 5th, 2 years ago, I had my right leg amputated below the knee, and it has been incredibly challenging, but I've always looked at challenge as a good thing, not a difficult thing. Well, I say it's a difficult thing, but it's not a bad thing. We don't necessarily have bad days; we have hard days. And the last 2 years has been extraordinary. I've just got back from a trip to Zambia, running through airports to catch flights. I hike. As soon as we're finished talking, I will be back at the gym. kind of in part fighting the jet lag, in part just trying to continue to do what I need to do to get me further along in this journey so that I can scramble over rocks and jump over logs and do the things that I need to do, all while holding, big camera gear and carrying a backpack. So it's been an extraordinary journey. And I hesitate to identify as an amputee. I've really wrestled with this whole idea of disability because this weirdly this amputation, while you could look at it and visibly I am quote unquote disabled, but I'm much more abled now than I was in the 12 years leading up to the amputation. I do more. I'm more active. I'm in a much better mood. So it's been very interesting, and that kind of brings us up to the present. Still photographing, still speaking and writing and teaching about creativity and photography, and doing it now uh, as an amputee. And you asked me before we started the show, how it's going, and it's honestly it's going so well that it's kind of hard to keep the smile off my face. It's hard, challenging, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think my life is fuller and richer now than it has been in a while. Not to say that it wasn't full and rich, but it was kind of on this downward slope where I was spending so much time on the couch, and I knew I would spend more time. And now, I only spend time on the couch when I'm tired because I've worked too hard in the gym.
What sort of challenges are you facing?
Oh, some of it is just some of it is you wake up in the morning and I wake up in the morning and I look at my prosthetic leg beside the bed and I'm like, oh, you again. It has sort of started to be a bit of a routine, but at the same time, every day is a little different. The fit is not always the same as it was the day before. Bodies, they have a bit of an ebb and flow to them, and sometimes things are too tight and sometimes things are too loose. Um, but but beyond that, I think the biggest one is just like phantom limb pain. That is has taken me quite by surprise and has intrigued me so much. The power of the brain, that the foot isn't there, and yet I can feel my foot right now. I'm wearing my prosthetic leg and I've got shoes on, and I can feel it. It's just a very strange sensation to like in the middle of a conversation suddenly my foot will start itching, and I don't have a foot and yet it's itching. I will have it's very electrical, the phantom limb stuff, and so I'll have zips and zaps. But beyond that, I'm not, for the most part, the 2 years leading to this point where things have so stabilized, and I'm now I don't have to second guess my movement. I move naturally on my prosthetic. Um, so most of the challenge is the mental challenges of all of that adaptation and sort of the daily improvisation of working with a leg that isn't there. Most of that has gone now, and it's just the daily kind of, like I said, every now and then I have to kind of take the leg off and put a couple extra socks between the prosthetic socket and my leg, or I have to take it off and take a couple layers of socks off just because of that ebb and flow. But I kind of feel like I'm back to normal, but a better than normal, if that makes sense. We all talked about during COVID. We talked about the new normal, and I've found a new normal that is, how do I put it? I love the value of constraint for creativity, and my whole world is about creativity. I love the value of challenge, and so it kind of feels like I've got to this tension between me and challenge, where it's no longer a, ugh, how's today going to work out? It's sort of a, there's an adventure. There's a new adventure every day. And I can only say that now that that adventure is a little bit more predictable. It's a little less scary because I'm going into it every day like I've got this. And I know that because of, the last 700 days behind me, where I'm like, things are not going to be so wildly unusual for me, at least with my leg, that it's going to cause me problems. So, the challenges are stabilizing and becoming, just like I said, they're more physical than they are mental, which is nice. For a long time, there was a lot going on up in my brain related to the changes, and your whole identity changes, and the way you look at yourself and the way you think. People don't look at me different, I don't think, but you wonder if they do. You anticipate that they might, and that has, after 2 years, sort of stabilized as well.
That's interesting, that you have a sense of identity change.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can describe it, Pat. I just know that, especially with where labels are concerned, and we have a choice: do we adapt those or not? And I find myself a little bit Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde over this stuff. I sort of roundly reject this idea of, I am now disabled as a label. And yet, the minute I park in accessible parking, it just, some days it's just, some days you're not having a great day. You're like, okay, I'll park in accessible parking. And several times now, I drive a sort of a big manly vehicle. It's an overland rig for getting me to remote places. And a few times people have said, well, you don't look disabled. And they say it very, because they haven't seen my permit.
Mhm.
They assume I'm taking the spot from an able-bodied person. And of course, I get out, and I've usually my prosthetic leg is visible, but not always. And and I really wrestle with it, because it's like, which card do I play here? Do I sort of take umbrage at the fact that they're disrespecting the disabled? Do I, so it's a funny thing how these labels can lead you to not just identify with a whole new identity, but wrestle with,
Mhm.
am I not? And like I said, I'm very inconsistent at this point. I'm like, I'm not disabled until it's to my advantage to be. And then I sort of feel like I'm taking up the torch and defending. And it's interesting, because people that do that, people that say, well, you don't look disabled. I know that, in as ignorant as that is, because what does disabled look like? I know that what they're doing is sort of defending those that, it's like, why are you taking that spot from someone else? So I, I'm I'm finding a graceful way to work through that, and to encounter that. But like, when I say finding, I haven't found it yet. I'm not as graceful as I'd like to be.
I
Um,
don't know that you ever find it. I went through a period where I was really disabled with a neurologic disease, but I looked
mm,
fine to most people. And that exactly what you're saying, that for me, it wasn't where do I identify, but for me, it was how do other people identify this? Because my mind is fine,
mm,
but it's just my body is weak.
mhm,
And and to the casual observer, I looked fine.
mm,
So how do you reconcile that when people are, oh, you look fine, there isn't anything wrong with you, to I'm so exhausted I can't move.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and yet part of me just wants to tell people, just mind your own damn business. My doctor seems to think that my up until the amputation, I have had an accessible parking placard for years, and I try not to use it. I actually like parking at the far end of the parking lot, because it means I get a bit of a walk in, and it's part of my physiotherapy. And I got all of this done so that I could walk farther distances. But one of the challenges is in tight parking spots. If I can't open my door fully, I can't get out, because I don't have an ankle that articulates. So that's one of my issues, is just simply, the accessibility of a wider parking spot. Um, yeah, I don't. Now I've forgotten the question, but there are no easy answers for any of this stuff, and it's the struggles that we face in a day-to-day our day-to-day lives are, so many of them are in fact, I would argue, probably the most challenging of them are invisible, and there's no sort of like, here's what it means to be disabled, and here's what it means not to be, and it looks like this, and this. I follow on Instagram, I follow a lot of adaptive athletes, I follow some quadriplegics, and there's one woman I follow who is a quadriplegic, requires a wheelchair, but she has some movement in her in her legs and her arms, but not full control. And she's constantly battling people saying, "Oh, you're not a quadriplegic. I saw you. I saw your legs move." And it's like we need a little more nuance in this, and your ignorance is showing. But is it our job to educate? I mean, I don't want to spend my day educating people about my condition, or I just want to get on with my life, and at the same time be a gracious human being and not just snap at people and tell them to mind their own damn business. Despite what I would very much like to say, it's a strange place to be at, to be constantly trying to be yourself and yet also being an advocate for people that have limb difference or some hidden disability, um, and just trying to be, trying to walk through this world with some grace at the
Well,
same time,
well, maybe the rest of the world needs a little grace and having a little compassion.
Oh, certainly they do, and yet I think because there's so much misunderstanding, it's like, is now the opportunity to play educator, or do I just go on my day? And if kids stare a lot, and I have no problem with kids, staring and making comments. And if someone asks me, I'm very happy, because I think, kids are in that they're naturally curious, and I like to encourage that curiosity. It's when adults sort of like, they stop you in the grocery store while you're doing some mundane thing and say how inspiring you are, or, I gotta know, how did what happened to your leg? I'm like, I'm just trying to get some granola bars, man. Like, let me get the broccoli and move on, without feeling like I have an obligation to share that. But again, you don't want to be a jerk about it, and so some days I'm more successful at that than others.
Did you get any specialized prosthetic feet or anything like that?
Yeah, I have four different feet, and the whole world of prosthetics is fascinating. But I have an everyday foot, that's just a carbon fiber. It's got a bit of an arc, like a running blade does, and it's fascinating stuff. I have a running blade that, it's that kind of, you'd see it in the Special Olympics and that sort of thing. That big arc of a
Mhm.
blade without a proper foot at the end. I actually don't like it. I run better on my regular foot. And I have a foot that I use for cycling, and I have my very first foot, which is hydraulic and has like, it can articulate under body weight, but I don't like it. It's kind of very rigid at the ankle moves, but it's very, anyway, it's a little heavy and kind of clunky. But the technology is always changing. Unfortunately, the more technology you put into a foot, the more you have to spend on it, and
Funny how that works, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. So I'm now a brand ambassador for a company called Levitate, and they create prosthetics for amputees, but very accessible in terms of pricing. I should say, they create feet for amputees. They don't do knees and joints and that sort of thing, but very accessible and innovative, kind of disrupting the old prosthetic industry, which is, I kind of like scrappy companies that are willing to try something new. And this is like a Danish company that said, send us. It's basically their pitch is, send us $2,000, your body weight and size, and we'll send you a running foot, and it's compared to, like, for example, going to your prosthetist, spending $10,000, getting, it's just, it can be very complicated. So.
What about a swimming foot? What do you do for swimming? Because you've done a lot of water photography in the past, haven't
Mhm. I have, and I haven't solved that problem yet. Although it's more of a question than a problem. I haven't been in the water as a diver since the surgery. I haven't really felt like it, to be honest. But I've been in the pool in terms of just swimming, and I just take my whole leg off. And I thought before I got into the water the first time, I thought, oh, what's this going to be like? My God. And I had this vision of me like swimming like a corkscrew or something, because I only have the one leg. And honestly, it's pretty much the same. My legs move the same. I don't have quite as much power and propulsion, but I swim just the same. I float just the same. So I imagine when I get back in the water, I will have one of two options. Either just put a wetsuit over my prosthetic and
Hmm.
put a fin on the foot. Or I have a friend who, depending on the kind of diving, whether it's warm water or cold water, he'll just go in without his prosthetic leg and just have one fin on. And I used to joke that he's so fit, that even as an amputee, he swims circles around me. And then he would joke that he can only swim circles because he's only got one leg. But I don't think it'll be a challenge once I decide to get back in the water. I think the biggest challenge is getting in and out of the boat or whatever you're using to get into the water. If you're doing a shore dive, carrying all that extra heavy gear and that sort of thing would probably require that I just put a wetsuit or dry suit over my prosthetic, but I don't see it being much of an issue.
Has it impacted your travel? Because you carry a lot of heavy gear when you travel.
No, I not really. I really rely on a roller duffel bag instead
Hmm.
of one that I sling over my shoulder. But this last trip to Zambia, I had tight luggage restrictions, so I brought a duffel bag that didn't have wheels. And most airports have push carts and that sort of thing. But really, I mean, when I go to the gym, I'm leg pressing 300 pounds. I get on the treadmill for 30 minutes and do a really good clip with a good incline. I'm back to much better than I was before the surgery. So no, it hasn't. It except that it has improved. I have less pain. I have fewer obstacles now that I have a working. It's a mechanical foot, but it's working compared to what I had 2 years ago, which really was the ankle had been fused. It was painful. I think so. Things are much better. And this is why I sort of rail against this idea of disability. I was more disabled before I was an amputee than I am now. And so these labels, if we think too hard about them, I think they can be, it's the label that becomes the obstacle.
I think that is very true. I think you have to identify whatever it is you're facing as a whole, um, capable person. And everybody has their issues one way or the other, and particularly as we age. But I think that identity as a can-do person is really important.
I think so. I think, I mean, I've always sort of looked at things as not as obstacles. And it's again going back to the idea of creativity. If we wait until conditions are perfect to do our art, our craft, whatever it is that we engage in a daily basis, we're just always going to wait because conditions are never perfect. That is the human condition that we live with imperfection and impermanence and change. And so even if conditions were perfect today, they're not going to be perfect tomorrow because things are going to change. And so going into it all with this can-do attitude, with this like let's figure it out. Everything is figure outable. And there are very few things. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean like I don't mean to trivialize it. But it can't. I mean, I watch enough video clips of adaptive athletes, people that have, for example, there's one gal she was born fully without a right leg, so she's got a little bit of a stump on the right, I guess on the right side. She is I mean, she does CrossFit. She does stuff that I look at it and go, never in a million years. Does it mean it's easy? No, of course not. She's very transparent with her struggle, but she is like, when I think about applying the term disabled to her, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And there are people that are so fully functional in their bodies that fail to live a full life because they have a victim mentality, or I mean, the number of mental disabilities I can think of, and I don't even mean the ones that clinical. I'm talking about misogyny and racism, and I mean the number of ways that we limit ourselves in our thinking that I think truly disable human beings from having a full life. I mean, my the fact that I'm missing a leg is nothing compared to someone who's missing compassion or empathy or an ability to problem solve and just get over themselves. Um, I'd rather my prosthetic get in the way than my own limiting beliefs.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's interesting though, talking about beliefs. It kind of takes us into that range of psychology. Has there been much study done on the phantom pain issue? Do you know anybody who's doing any research there?
Oh, there's lots of study that's been done. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have. And again, I'm not an expert. I kind of dabbled in it just to see, purely out of self-interest. I wanted to see what kind of solutions there were. I can't find anything that indicates here's what triggers it long term. I like right now, everything's fine. I've got a little phantom sensation. I can feel my foot, even though it's not there, but I'm not having phantom pain. But every now and then I have a day where it's just, I do experience it and I can't figure out what triggers it. Is it caffeine? Is it, what is it? I don't know. And nothing that I've read, but there's plenty of study that has gone into it in terms of how can we mitigate it.
Mhm.
I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's in Stanford, and he has done the kind of research that has led to mirror therapy. So putting for example, if I was missing my right arm, putting a mirror or a mirror box here, and then my left arm is reflected in that mirror, and you do a series of exercises. Of course, there's no actual hand over here, but you're doing a series of exercises with this hand. It's reflected in the mirror, and you do it for sort of 30 minutes a day, and something about that rewires the brain and has been very helpful in mitigating phantom limb pain. I did it for a little bit for a while, and after a bit, I sort of thought, I don't know if it's working or if it's just time, but I didn't have 30 to 40 minutes a day to sit on the floor in front of, with a mirror between my legs, and it was really hard work too. It wasn't passive. It wasn't just look at, it was you move the one, but you have to sort of I don't know if the word pretend is the right word, but you have to visualize and try to activate the muscles that would be. And so 40 minutes would exhaust me. And I just kind of went, you know what? It's fine. I'll live with it. And because everyone was saying with time, you should experience significant improvement, which again, I did. Was it helped by the phantom pain? I have no idea. Or helped by the mirror therapy? I don't know. But there's plenty of people who are looking into it because it's yet to the best that I can tell, it's unresolved. People don't really know what is responsible. But the metaphor in my brain is sort of like it's like the brain is making a phone call to to the my foot, and it's not getting an answer, and so it's leaving an increasingly agitated series of voicemail messages. Come on, I know you're listening, I know you're there, and of course, it's not there, and it over time it has become it's become much better. But it's quite amazing that the body. There was a study that I read for congenital amputees. So people that were born that didn't ever have, it's not like they were born with a leg and then had it amputated. They were born without it. And it was only one study. 20% of those who responded to it said that they experienced very specific phantom pain in the limb that they never had. So someone that was born without a right arm still had the phantom pain and sensation that indicated like they knew what it felt like to have four fingers and a thumb, having never actually had it. So it tells me that, that some of this is hardwired. It's not like we are born and then our brain figures out our hands. Our brain was born with those instruction manuals and those connections intact. Anyway, it's only one study, but I find it very interesting that the mind body connection is so powerful, and it's probably helpful when I walk. I can't feel the bottom of my foot. My proprioception is different, but I do feel like I have a foot there. It's not like my leg ends at my just below my knee. There's a feeling of sensation and wholeness there, even though that wholeness or that sensation is an illusion. So it's pretty cool.
Has this impacted your photographic vision?
I don't know, Pat. I mean it must. And yet I don't know that it does, except that I spend a lot less time in pain. And I think people that are in pain are preoccupied and sort of you see through a bit of a fog. Pain is very distracting. And I am free now to do things that I haven't done in a long, long time. And so it must in some way take that fog away. I feel like maybe I'm seeing clearer. What it has done is I've sort of doubled down on the idea that life is short and beautiful and worth grabbing by the horns, that the challenges that we face really are a help to us, not just they're not an obstacle. They are, in fact, the door. They don't block creativity. They're the door through which we pass. Um, and and I think I've become. I mean, certainly I've become a different person. I think I'm more gracious, despite what I said earlier. I think I'm more patient. I think so. My ability to translate what I see into my photography has probably improved, but I don't know that my vision of the world really has. I still see the world as a beautiful place. I still photograph the same kinds of things, still hunger to get out there and experience more of it. But I don't think it's changed. That may have been very different if I was, for example, if I had some kind of a really immediate, if I'd been in a motorcycle accident and woken up in the hospital and my leg wasn't there and experienced all of that loss, and it wasn't something that I chose. I'm sure the mental struggle there would have been very different, but it's important to remember that there are different ways to getting to amputation, and I chose this. It was not as much a loss as it was a gain. The loss I'd already experienced that for 12 years. It was a slow, progressive. So the mental space in which I experience amputation is probably very different than someone who wakes up in the hospital bed missing a limb and has to go through that mourning process and that whatever it takes for them to see it as a gain. For me, there was nothing but upside. I had fears going into the surgery, and those fears were all about what if I wake up and my foot is still there? What if they have some issue and they can't take it off and I have to live with this thing? Those were my fears, and I have to admit those are very different than someone that just wakes up and upon whom these changes would be thrust completely unwillingly. I imagine that journey would be very different.
I agree with you. Life is short and we should get out and do everything we can. How has this impacted your goals, and what are your goals as a photographer?
Increasingly, so I'm 53 now, and that's to a lot of the people to whom I speak and write, I'm still a young pup. But I'm very conscious of the fact that, certainly I have passed the middle point, well past the middle point, if we're talking about averages. I'm pretty aggressive about living the life I want to live, knowing full well that at some point, and I'm watching my mother age right now, and my mother's 83, just turned 84, and she's not. I'm self-conscious saying this, but I know unlike my writing, she probably will never listen to this, so I feel okay sort of disclosing it. But there's 83 and then there's 83 or 84. I have clients that come on trips with me, and they're so fit they could probably go and climb Kilimanjaro tomorrow, and I'd be left in the dust. Uh, that is one kind of 84, and there's the other kind of 84 where there's physical decline, there's mental decline, and I'm very conscious of the fact that the decisions that I make right now are in part going to be responsible for which 84 I experience in
Yes.
30 years. So I'm very conscious of the fact that life is short. One of the raw materials of photographers is time, and we value the 1/60th of a second, 1/1000th of a second, and we work with time. And I can't help but think that it's going to all go by so much faster than any of us expect. I see it in my mom when she sort of says, "I don't recognize this old person in the mirror." My mother, like me, I'm still 18 in my mind. I'm still 23. I'm still a young person. And every now and then I look at it, where did all that gray hair come from? Where did all my hair go? And I know my mother looks in the mirror and goes, "Who is that old woman?" It goes by so quickly. And so has any of this changed me? I think it's just galvanized my desire to live in the here and the now, and yes, to make wise choices, because God help me, I might actually live to 85, but I might not. And I want to find that tension, live in that tension between live like it's your last day. And yes, live with some wisdom and don't, I can't spend everything in my savings account, but I may never get to spend it if, we don't, none of us get to take it with us when we go. So, what do you want to do with your life? I don't know what my goals are specifically. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. And I think I'm in a very fortunate position in that those aspirations are not a one day thing. They're not, gosh, one day I hope I go to on safari. One day I hope it's if I have a one day, I always try to make it happen in the now. Like, how can I make that happen within the next year, the next 2 years? Because I may not have 5 years. Every one of us, surely we all know at this point in our lives, someone who has just received that, one day they think they're fine, and the next minute they're getting a diagnosis. And I was just speaking to a very close friend, and her mother was fine. And within, I think she said within 3 weeks, maybe she said 3 months, but either way, it was a very short period of time. She got some kind of autoimmune thing, and she was gone. And I just to I think the Western mindset is sort of work, 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 save, save, save until you get to retirement. And when I retire, then I will. Well, that assumes so many things that we should never assume. It assumes good health. It assumes that we're still alive. It assumes that the partner we're with is still with us. It assumes so many things. Yes, there is a balance to be had because, like I said, we might actually make it to old age and we want to have some money in the bank account. But I think if we had to choose one over the other, I think it would be crazy to gamble a future we may not have on a present we know. You could go to Venice right now. You may not go to Venice when you're 70 years old. You may get to 70 and not have the ability to sit on the airplane that gets you to Venice or put up with all the people that are on that airplane, you know. So it is a tricky balancing act, and I'm so fortunate in that this also is part of my career. So for me to to run off to Zambia or something is it's kind of necessary. I don't know how I'd make a living. I'm so unemployable in any other field that I just have to kind of keep doing what I'm doing and hope that the money doesn't run out.
Living for tomorrow that may not happen. Actually, it will never happen. Whatever you
Yeah,
imagine will not be there. It'll be
yeah,
something totally different. And I think the only thing we have is to be present and being truly present. And I think photography helps a lot with that, or any artistic endeavor really helps you be present. And that's where life happens.
100%. And there's an interesting correlation in all of that sort of that soup. And it comes to challenge because when we are so there's this idea of flow when we're in creative flow, and that's when we're engaged in something that just takes up we're interested in it, it's challenging us but not too much. But we're not aware of time. 3 hours passes and we're like, wow, where did the time go? I was so immersed in this. An important element of that is challenge. Without challenge, we can't get into flow. And so I rather than trying to live a life without challenge, overcome all these challenges and get them in the past, it, there's a way of living that is so present, but I can't imagine it being possible without challenge. I can't imagine because creativity needs a problem to solve. It needs to have a bit of a fight. I think it's one reason why people that are involved in activism and stand for a cause are so rejuvenated by that because it keeps them in the present. It keeps them in the now. The problem may not get solved for 100 years, but darn it, I'm going to fight for it right now. And yes, photography does that. Absolutely. It helps you become very aware. But any creative process that engages and presents a challenge and then lets you engage that challenge with all of your skill set and your imagination, it is a beautiful way to spend a life. We can't arrest time, but I think we can sort of slow it. Or maybe we don't slow it. Maybe we just go deeper into its flow. But uh, I can't imagine getting to the point where you work your whole life to retire, and that's the thing you've been chasing. Because at most you're only going to get I mean, for most of us, maybe you get 25 years of really active retirement.
Maybe.
Probably, I mean, statistically, that's not even, probably 20. But to have given up, 45 years of a working life and been on the treadmill for all of that, I think there's a way that we can integrate one into the other. I don't want to retire. I just want to be I want to live the things that I want to do in retirement. I want to find a way to integrate them now, not so much work life balance as work life integration. So I don't even know what work life balance would look like at this point because there is no real line between people. When I arrive home into Canada at customs, I always say, is it work or is it pleasure? And I don't mean to be a smartass, but yes, because it's always both for me. And I think anyone can find a way to make that happen, to integrate the things about which they're curious and passionate into their lives. I'm not saying quit your job and try to be an artist. That's just so hard. But there is a way to integrate it so that your life is full of things about which you're curious and passionate, and picking up these little challenges and engaging them. Whether you're able-bodied or not, you don't need to get an amputation to pick up the challenge of something that's interesting to you, that's worthwhile to you.
There's so much personal cost, I think, waiting for tomorrow that will never happen. The personal cost is partly your own development. You're very right-brained. We've talked about this in the past, and it took me a long time to understand some of the things you said because at the time I was so much more left-brained. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I've seen, at least in my evolution, is a much better balance between the two. And for all those very left-brained people out there, you're missing a bunch. And it's one of those things you need to integrate, I think, into your life, whether it's through creativity, sports, whatever it is that spins your wheels, because to fail to address your own personal development on many levels for all those years you're working is such a disservice. You're going to wake up and be retired and be stripped of your identity and everything that formed it. And then what do you do?
Yeah. I think life is about growing, and these are not really my words, though I'd be darned if I can remember who said them. But I think life is about growing into greater complexity. It's about engaging these challenges. It's about who you are becoming. And, the person that I was at 18, I mean, I'm glad I am so well past that, but I have not allowed myself to get stuck in that. I think we can actually get stuck in coming back to identity, even in the idea that I am left-brained or I am right-brained. Science has shown that idea of a hemisphere-specific
Mhm.
personality is certainly, it's much more porous than we believed. The left-right thing, but also that the brain has incredible plasticity,
Oh, yeah.
and any trough, or creatives like to talk about the groove, and yet those grooves can become ruts so quickly. You need to be firing your brain in as many different ways as possible, especially as we get into our later years, especially if we want to. I don't know how much we can avoid some of this hardwired stuff, but I'm terrified of getting Alzheimer's. I'm terrified of dementia. I want to keep my brain active for as long as possible. And it seems that the science points toward the idea that a more active life, where you are firing as many different synapses in different ways, you not just kind of, well, it would be very easy to say, well, I'm right-brained, and so this is the way I am, and I don't operate in these particular realms. Um, that's your challenge is, okay, what are those areas that the reason you don't operate in those because you've believed that you can't do them. I can't do math, or so I believed. But the other day I was building something, and suddenly I was like, oh, I remember the theorem for that. I remember, I had to Google it and figure it out, but suddenly that part of my brain that I had actually put in a closet, locked away, and said, we're not good at this. Suddenly I was like, actually, I'm not that bad at it. It's just when I was 18, I believed I was and locked it away. it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if I picked up a math. I'm not going to, but you know, because life is short, and I'm not. But you know, if I picked up a math textbook, or you know, like, and this is why we need to read broadly outside of our
Yes.
interests. And it's why we need to not fall into the trap where Amazon is constantly reinforcing the echo chamber of whatever limited, like, oh, you read this, you might like this. Well, yes, I might, but what about the, so it's going to take you deeper and deeper into those ways of thinking, and that's not bad, but not to the exclusion of going broad and kind of, you know, reading a book about, I don't know, neuroplasticity, which is where
Mhm.
all this came from for me. I don't know why I picked the book I'm thinking of is called The Brain That Changes Itself. I was never, it's not like I woke up one day and went, I'm really interested in neuroplasticity. For some reason, maybe someone lent me the, I don't know, but suddenly I'm reading it. I'm like, I am very interested in this. Didn't know I was until, and, and I think as we get older, we need to exercise this brain into other areas and encourage that breadth uh, because our brain, you know, the more we kind of the neurons that fire are where the brain gets wired. And if we are firing only in very small, limited areas and not exposing ourselves to other ideas and open to being wrong and prove, you know, like there's so much richness mentally available for us if we just refuse to just kind of go, well, that's just the way it is for me. You know,
Well,
so
no,
I'm a little I think the older I get and the more worried I am about my brain failing me, the more I'm sort of like, we got to do something about this. And I'm worried about this, the echo chamber stuff. We only listen to the people on social media that we agree with. We only read the books that we think we will agree with. And it just takes us deeper and deeper into, you know, an ever narrowing channel instead of branching us out into something that's maybe got a little more humility, that's laced with, I don't know, that's laced with, let's find out, that's, you know, that's a little bit more. I think that can only serve us as we get older.
yeah, no, I totally agree. Ongoing learning is so important. And you know, our brains really do adapt. You talk about neuroplasticity. For me in my life, that's been a really important concept because after 6 years of dealing with lymphoma and all the chemo and everything that went with it, I could no longer do a lot of the basic tasks I used to do. My brain wouldn't do it. And so I was really forced to expand my world, learn some different things, and neuroplasticity is real. And it's
Hmm.
something that stays with us forever. It doesn't go away just because we become 65 or 70 or 80. It's still there, and we can still activate that.
It's a capacity. So you know, it's like a balloon. You can choose to fill it with air and expand it much bigger than you might expect, or you can just let it sit there. And unfortunately, a lot of people just let it sit there. But one of the things that, again, going back to this mind-brain connection that really fascinates me, for 12 years, I couldn't jump. I didn't, you know, my ankle didn't work. I was terrified of the pain of landing. I couldn't jump. And I got my new foot. And of course, I don't have the mechanism that you need to jump, you know, sort of requires two ankles, but not really. And the other day you know, I've been doing box jumps at the gym, and but it started with like my trainer months ago said, okay, we're gonna jump, and I got tricked because I did a couple things, and he said, okay, good, now you're ready to do burpees, and I was like, I don't want to do burpees.
Oh,
You tricked
no.
me into it, but it started with just like little tiny hops, and now I jump onto a 2 foot box. I jump on, I jump off, I jump on, I jump off. And I was playing frisbee with a friend the other day. I haven't been able to do this for 12 years, and we're playing frisbee in the street, running after it, and the frisbee went higher than I expected, and I leapt, and my friend went, "You just like wow!" There was a mental block, there was a physical block, and yet you break it down into little, okay, I can't jump 2 feet, but I could jump an inch. And yes, it feels silly. But then your brain goes, oh my gosh, I can jump an inch. And if I can jump an inch, I can jump 2 inches. And your body kind of catches up with it and then informs the next. And it's this kind of feedback loop that happens between the brain and the body. It blows my mind what we can do if we just, set aside our pride, set aside the idea that I can't, and go, well, maybe. Like, let's see. I can't do it. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be, the jump I can do now won't be the jump I can do in a year, but I can do something. And I think sometimes we look ahead at that thing that we can't do a year from now and go, well, see, I can't do that. No, you can't. But you couldn't speak English when you were born, and you learned a few words, and you learned a few more, and suddenly you had language skill enough to communicate what made you happy, what made you sad. You were communicating, and to the point where now we're adults and words come out of our mouths, and I don't even know how it happens because I'm not thinking these words. They're just coming out, and by some miracle they make sense. It's the same with everything that we attempt to do. There will be some barriers. There will be some things that's like, yep, it turns out I can't do that. But most of us can get a lot closer to it than we think. Most of us, the things we have told ourselves, the stories, we're storytelling animals, and we believe the story that we tell ourselves the most. And part of it is rewriting that story, rewriting the idea of who we are in our brain. It's incredible.
And letting go of that idea that you have to be an expert at everything from day one. The Buddhists have a great concept, beginner's mind.
Mm.
And it's something that actually you should apply no matter where you are in your growth stage in terms of mastering something. If you can always come in with beginner's mind, all of a sudden you'll make different connections. You'll try things differently. You may not succeed, but that's okay. That's part of beginner's mind, is to put aside your ego and simply engage.
I love the concept of beginner's mind, and I actually think it becomes more important the deeper you go into something. The idea that there are martial arts where when you get to the highest level of black belt, you no longer progress. You actually go back, even though you are a whatever degree black belt. You go back to the very beginning and you start again. And I worry that when we become really good at something, when we become an expert at something, that we no longer know what we don't know. Our blind spots become even bigger, and as we grow into greater expertise, I think beginner's mind is even more important. We should be asking more often, what am I missing? Am I right about this? What am I wrong about? Not to beat ourselves up, but just as opportunity for growth and go, oh, okay, I see how, I believed that for a long time and it got me to this point, but I'm not sure it's valid anymore. I'm not sure that met with new information or new skills, maybe I need to change up. I see it in photography all the time because technology always changes.
Oh boy.
So it would be so foolish of me to think I learned back in the film days. I was 14 years old, picked up a camera. I learned how to use a film camera. The technology that I use now is so beyond that. And even in the last couple of years, there are functions that I would not have used 2 years ago because the technology wasn't there, and I created a way of doing things. Well, that technology has changed, and so should the way that I do things. I could now look at that technology and go, "Wow, it's come a long way." Great example: when autofocus first came out, I remember thinking, "There's no way. Like I can focus my." I was good at focusing. Now autofocus is so fast for me to go, you know what? I learned to focus when I was a kid. I'll just keep focusing. And, I mean, my autofocus will keep up with a cheetah running away from the camera, the fastest land mammal on the planet. My autofocus will not miss a beat. There's no way I could pull that focus manually. It's a silly example, but so much, everything in life changes. And yet we grab onto an understanding and we don't allow that understanding to change. We create a behavior or a belief about ourselves, about the world, but we change.